Okay, welcome everybody on Zoom. Hopefully everyone can hear us okay. Hi Spiro, others that are on Zoom. Couple of things as we get started today. We are going to record the meeting. So keep that in mind. There are a number of people who couldn't make it today, either on Zoom or in person, and we want to make sure that everybody has access to the information. So letting you know that right now. The other thing is that you can use this QR code or go to this website to ask live questions that are anonymous as they might come up for you today. And we will try to keep track of it and make sure to get to those during the question and answer portion. You can also just wait and ask at the end for any questions that you have, but this might be a way if you have something and you don't want to raise your hand in front of 30 people, you can do it this way. We'll also provide you with the same survey that we developed that was sent out with the strategic plan, where you'll be able to provide feedback and follow-up questions after today. And with that, we're going to get started, and I will hand it over to you, Spiro, to kick things off.
Thank you very much, Erin. Well, welcome to all of those of you in person and us who are here virtually. I was asked to provide a broad context and background to the strategic planning processes for our centers over the last 3 decades and the importance, from my perspective and based upon prior experience, of the strategic planning process that we've been engaged in most recently. If I can have the next slide, please, Erin. So just to give you a sense of the strategic planning process over the last 30 years, I arrived and we established the National Center for American and Alaska Native Mental Health Research in July of 1986. The establishment of that initial center, which subsequently grew over those decades into many more, was dictated by the transfer of the initial grant from the Oregon Health Sciences University to the University of Colorado Health Science Center, as then we were called. It required the review and approval by an NIMH select committee. And at that point in time, the major functions of that center was to emphasize research training, program development, and information dissemination, and provided initially both our values, vision, mission, and specific strategies and tactics that followed thereof. It was in July of 1990 that the sponsor, the National Institute of Mental Health, introduced the notion of the decade of the brain. This revised dramatically our strategic plan. It in fact eliminated the emphases that had been previously funded in terms of program development and information dissemination. But because those two elements of our mission were so central and highly prized by our tribal constituents, that we were able to retain them through the addition of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Healthy Nations Initiative, which lasted for 15 years, and the first of now 13 resource centers initially begun under the Administration on Aging's resource investment in us. July of 2009, the first full year after the establishment of the Colorado School of Public Health, we negotiated a transfer of this next version of the centers from the Department of Psychiatry and the School of Medicine to this new Colorado School of Public Health. It reflected several things, not the least of which was the opportunity for our faculty to break through the glass ceiling that had been present in the School of Medicine and had constrained the development and the trajectories of faculty and staff within that department and the school, and open up new horizons for us in the School of Public Health. It also underscored the shift from clinical and treatment-based focus to a broader expansion to community-based efforts. In July of 2013, nearly 5 years later, according to the strategic plan and the memorandum of agreement that was reached in 2009, in which we were established as a University of Colorado Health Science Center-wide center by the CU regions, we were required then to engage in strategic planning process on a more regular basis. It was in 2013 that we updated our strategic plan, and the strategic planning process became an intimate element of the memorandum of agreement that has characterized us over these years. And now we find ourselves today beginning to update the most recent version of that, which spanned 2 years of negotiation between us and John Salmon, our new dean, upon his arrival, and serves as the cornerstone for our efforts. Next slide, please. Why is a strategic planning process important? It's important because it uniquely situates CAIANH with respect to our goals, how to achieve them, and do that within the context of our place here in the school and the university broadly. The MOA and the supporting strategic plan define our organizational locus, the relationship to other School of Public Health units and the Dean's central office, the fiscal revenue sources, the distribution of those resources and obligations on our part, as well as the school and the university to one another. It provides guidance about academic appointments and lines of supervision and space allocation. Next slide, please. As I noted, we're placed within the Colorado School of Public Health. The next two slides show you the key elements that are deemed the essential factors that contribute to the growth of schools of public health. And there are four, basically. One has to do with growing the research enterprise. The second has to do with increasing the Masters in Public Health and Masters of Science degrees. The third is innovation, and the fourth is endowments. The two X's through the latter 2 points actually reflect a recent report by Dean Bradley last week, indicating that there are major constraints and have been on the school broadly with that. The pie chart to the right gives you a sense for the relative distribution of the resources of revenue to the school. And you can see that research, the broad green, is the largest, nearly, I think, some 65, almost 2/3 of the source of revenue for the school. Next slide, please. This next slide shows you the growth in research that's occurred in the school broadly, to which CAIANH has contributed enormously. In fact, we have been historically the largest source of research revenue for the School of Public Health. And of course, the current federal funding climate poses some challenges for us, the school, and the institution broadly that we're addressing to the best of our ability. Next slide, please. What's the importance of realizing these strategic goals? These strategic goals provide a clear direction for us. They guide decision-making. They improve the ways which we allocate resources. They are central to how we measure performance individually and programmatically. They are intended to boost motivation as well as engagement among ourselves and with our constituents. They're intended to align members with the center's vision and objectives, and to build ultimately a sense of community and clarify the nature and extent of commitment which we share individually and at large. Next slide, please. What's ultimately our joint responsibility? It's my opinion that collective goals lead to collective achievement. Henry Ford had a really fascinating way of thinking about this in the following quote: coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, working together is success. And I believe that that characterizes and summarizes very succinctly the way forward for us. We're about collective action that fosters a sense of community and solidarity, about sharing struggles and victories as they strengthen the bonds among us and with our constituents. A strategic plan and the collective achievement in that regard creates networks that endure beyond the immediate cause of a project, a program, etc. And ultimately, they're about optimizing collaboration that maximizes innovation and addresses the needs of science as well as the local benefit for our communities. So that's my view and brief background about where we've been, where we are, and where we're going and the importance of doing so. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Spiro. we're gonna jump right in. Please save questions to the end, or you can send them over on that anonymous poll and we will get to them. We want to get to the meat and potatoes of today, which is to talk about the hubs and the priority areas and goals, but we need to reorient everybody to the background. So very quickly reminding everyone that a very small group of us, only 3 of us, started meeting in December 2023. We were on the heels of a big administrative restructuring. It was post-COVID. Also, we had a lot of people who were retiring or about to retire, and we felt that we needed something that we wanted to dig our teeth into, and we started to think about a strategic plan. And we came together kind of around the slogan, we've been here 30 years, what do the next 30 years look like? And that kind of helped us orient and move our way forward. So we came up with a very loose plan and framework for the strategic plan. We took it to the CAIANH Executive Committee, and they had a lot of great feedback for us, which we then used to kind of tweak that plan, and we put it into a more organized framework, which we launched at the retreat in 2024. We invited several people who are leaders within the unit and have expertise to be leads for each hub area that we identified. So we looked at kind of chunking out our work and our areas of interest into 6 big hubs, and we invited people to lead those hubs. But then we invited everybody at the retreat last year to participate in the strategic plan, and to pick a hub group that they wanted to be part of. You all, or most of you, completed that survey. And then May through roughly October, we met once a month, once every other month, twice a month, whatever was convenient and needed for those hub groups. The goals throughout were, throughout the planning process, were really to try to increase transparency about how we operate as a group and encourage inclusiveness. So again, post-COVID, how do we come together? Who are we? Trying to find an identity. So that was one of the main points of coming together in the way that we did. And I think it's important to note that we did talk about hiring someone to professionally conduct a strategic plan with us. That was floated, and that's a really great idea. It just felt like the wrong time for it for us. We wanted it to be a little bit more grassroots in our approach at this time, because the importance of us coming together as a group and deciding what the future looked like. We were just at an important crossroads for CAIANH, and we wanted to invite all voices to be heard. And I think that we did accomplish that. And almost everybody in CAIANH participated in one way or another. We've had people who've come and gone who provided their feedback, which was also fantastic. So over the course of 18 months, so some meeting time, and then some time when those hub groups kind of didn't meet anymore, but the hub leads still met roughly monthly to try to cull through, what are these priority areas? What are these goals? How do we put it into a document that's cohesive, but also was true to the voice of the hubs, which looked quite different actually. So we provided some framework, but everybody had license to lead those meetings and have those voices be heard in whatever way felt right to them. So our goals in building the strategic plan were really to clarify our mission and values. We spent a lot of time on this at the retreat in 2024. We want to be able to allocate resources, as Spiro said. We want to support future growth. That's on everybody's mind. And we want to celebrate and have more collaboration and connections. So, in case anybody needs a reminder, these are the 6 hub areas and the leads that participated. Each hub lead is going to make a presentation about their group, and we'll tell you who was in their specific hub. But this is how we kind of looked at that. And some of these, the names of these groups changed over the course of that 18 months or 12 months of meeting for various reasons. But we kind of tried to stay true to that mission of this kind of covers the landscape of what CAIANH is. So I'm going to hand it over to Jen to start us off. But I did want to just remind everybody, we're going to blow through these presentations one after another, and please save questions to the end.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name's Jen Russell. I was not expecting such an audience today, but I'm so glad that you all are here. I will make this quick. I have a few minutes. So My hub team members were Renee Begay, Lisa Lewis, and Sierra and Isra, who are no longer with our centers, but they did participate in a lot of our early on meetings. So I just want to give them all a big round of applause and credit. They're not in here. They're on Zoom. They might be on Zoom.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so how it started. I think really how we started as a group and maybe how others did too, but I'm not sure. We started thinking about maybe what isn't working well, what needed to be improved, and then how could we do that? So a couple of things for recruitment and retention, which are our priority areas. Things that came up in the first couple of meetings were, why aren't we getting American Indian and Alaska Native applicants for open positions? We need to have more communications from PIs and hiring committees on what they can do for recruitment efforts. We need to make CAIANH more attractive to applicants. How do we influence young researchers and students to choose a career in Native health and create a better pipeline for recruitment? And that cultural competency training should be a part of onboarding. For retention, flexibility, and schedules to maintain healthy work-life balance is really important. And we need to focus on retaining our current dedicated, committed staff. One of the main things that came up over and over and over was social media and our social media presence. That was a big thing. These are mostly the main themes that came up, but social media presence was the biggest one, I think. Improving networking and outreach, so building that pipeline, building some relationships with tribal universities and colleges, things like that. Also tribal communities, improving hiring practices, such as the onboarding process. And one of the big things about onboarding was making sure that we had a cultural competency element to that. Enhancing supervisor skills, so making sure that all supervisors are taking the required training each year that the school has available. Supporting current staff and faculty, so what does that mean as far as professional development, mentorship, things like that. How am I doing?
Got 2 minutes and 20 seconds.
Oh, wow, okay. So I guess I could keep on going about that stuff. No, I won't. Okay, so our wish list, things that we really need to make these things happen, include money. Of course, I just want to put a note in here that these meetings took place before January of this year. So the landscape looks a lot different, especially when we're talking about recruitment. However, a lot of these things are still very relevant and applicable. So most of the things on our list include dedicated staff time. So whether that's staff dedicated to doing the cultural competency for the onboarding or staff dedicated to the social media presence. That was one big thing that we talked about, is we didn't really feel that that person should just be somebody who already exists, because they don't have time for such a big undertaking. So that would require quite a budget to bring on somebody that was really dedicated to the social media part. And participation, I think we talked about this a little bit, Erin did, but this is really a center-wide effort. This isn't just the hub leads doing this, but we need dedication and participation from everybody, because this is a team and we are moving forward together. So budget for outreach and recruitment activities. So going to those different recruitment events, having informational packets that we can give out, swag, of course, cool stuff. Travel, budget for new hire lunches, so making sure every time we hire somebody that we are welcoming them, setting them up with other staff, mentors at that time, and then checking in on them on a regular basis. And then a budget for professional development. And I think that's it. The only other thing I wanted to say is I think a lot of my hub stuff has crossover with other hubs, which you'll probably hear about. So yeah, thank you. Recruitment and your committees.
Thank you, Jen. All right, so big connection hub members. Claudia Kramer, Holly
McKinney and Jaylee Rancounter have been with the hub from the very beginning, before I was. They know as much or more about our priorities and goals as I do. So Claudia, Holly, Jaylee, feel free to interject. And Professor Sarche led the hub into the fall. I joined in around then and served as the hub lead active. Jaylee is our legacy keeper. So one question that arose during the planning process was, who is community? So what do we mean by community? On the right are all the entities that we consider community, with general public down there being individuals as well as local, state, and national agencies and organizations. And Native communities, of course, include tribes and government entities there. This description, as well as our hub goals, arose inductively from our planning activities. We met in person. That's co-pilot's rendition of 5 women. Hub members brainstormed all the ways that CAIANH already does and could in future connect with community. Then we categorized those by partner and by activity type. And that charting activity helped us see the many ways that we already excel in community connection. It helped us identify where we would like to excel further or in new ways. And it helped us see where we expect overlap with other hubs. So from here, we selected 3 priority areas. And here they are, along with the paraphrase of the vision for those areas. So growing trust with Native communities, especially with Denver Native community. We want the vision to be, let's increase togetherness, transparency, and knowledge exchange, including in informal settings. In this area, there were so many good ideas for local engagement. Next, partnership assessment and exploration. That vision is before we create something like an all CAIANH community steering committee, let's do more to understand the past and present relationships with Native communities. That might be reflective of our junior staff. We just want to learn more before moving ahead. And then finally, increase engagement with local and regional schools and Indigenous students. So there, we just wanted to make a special effort to include future generations among our community. All right, so goals. Most of these goals are kind of fun if you're thinking about what hub you want to be or what group you want to be with. So under growing trust, we've got the goals to do an assessment of, we want to increase opportunities for bi-directional learning with our Native community through cultural activities and through informal sharing of our work. And then the goal there to strengthen means of communication is about establishing a point of contact for the local community. And hopefully these efforts will increase the quality, not just the quantity of connection. Next, we want to assess and explore partnerships. The goals there are to do an assessment of some kind, to share those findings with CAIANH, and to create recommendations or considerations for more formal partnerships. Maybe the assessment is just a download of brains of our senior staff, but weaving this knowledge into CAIANH's fabric helps us understand where we come from as a center and how to be considerate in our partnership efforts. And finally, increasing engagement with local regional students, schools, and Indigenous students fit nicely with some of CAIANH's new efforts. And at the graduate level, we have a goal supporting outreach about the practicum and certificate. At the undergraduate level, we have an outreach goal to let students know about CAIANH. We also have 2 goals around fostering support and engagement with Indigenous students across educational levels. So the hub has many specific ideas about how to achieve the goals, but how they're realized is going to be shaped by CAIANH. So there's flexibility, and we hope you'll want to contribute.
right. So just briefly introduce myself. I've met a handful of some of our younger colleagues in the room before, but some of you are new. So I'm Jared Ivanich. I'm an assistant professor here and we'll member of the Metlakatla Indian community from Southeast Alaska. So excited to be here with you all and to talk a little bit about the Funding Diversification Strategic Planning Hub. So the folks that were instrumental in this hub were Sarah Horowitz, myself, Spiro, Doug, Jay, and Chelsea. As I mentioned in our brief little videos that were sent out to everybody, wrangling all of those people's schedules for a meeting was probably more challenging than the actual content, but I'm excited to present some of that to you all today. So there were two major priorities identified. As mentioned in that video that I just talked about, we went through a process first of identifying where we have been in terms of where does most of our funding come from, what are those funding streams, where do we go with that? Is that where we want to continue to go? Being a premier research institution, clearly research is going to be the bread and butter of what we do, but thinking about what are the other avenues that we can begin to think about bringing into the fold of the work that we do. Instead of it just being kind of what are the funding mechanisms out there, but like where do we want to go? How do we want to do that? We really identified two different main priority areas. The first of which is here, strengthen grant development and infrastructure. So there's a lot that we could talk about here, but I just wanted to put a couple of the major objectives for each year around the grant development here. So having applied for one center grant per year, as many of you know, center grants have been a long, rich part of our history here at the centers of being able to sustain so much of what we do in infrastructure that I don't think will ever go away. So really having to continue to apply for center grants will continue to be at that. We also talked about each eligible faculty member applying for one R series level grant each year. So that's a tall task in addition to center grants as well. And then also expanding the work and building on some of the folks already here that are doing this, but applying for non-federally funded funding to increase community engagement. So that was something that really came out that needed to be highlighted and that we can get into as well. The second priority area was to expand philanthropic engagement. So we haven't had as long of a history or deep of a history of working with different foundations and philanthropic groups. But it's an area that I think is a growing body of interest for the centers in terms of what those types of dollars will allow us to do. And being responsive to community needs, having a little bit more flexibility in some of the work that we envision moving forward. So to do that, I think there are several key areas that we'll need to lay out some goals, one of which is to connect with internal centers doing this well. So not reinventing the wheel, but also just building on the relationship of folks here already that are doing this well. How are they doing this? What was their plan? Just having some of those lunch meetings and just picking their brain, figuring that out. Then also, many of us are connected with so many external institutions and organizations that are doing that well. So really being strategic about how we connect with other external centers that are doing that well. And then this last one is establish a deeper relationship with the CU Foundation team. You know, I think they've got a very specific model for how they do that here at CU, but I think the more face time that we can get with them, the more we build those relationships that are already existing, the more we can build on that. So lastly, just want to highlight some of the resources in year one tasks. So I've kind of put the P1 and P2 for different priorities. So it will be a mixture of both volunteer and dedicated resources. So for that priority one, assessment of planned grant submissions, I think we really just need to like understand where everybody's at, where we need to go, who's most well poised to take on those applications, and then also apply for those federal grants. So not just doing the assessment, but then executing that. And then for that second priority, really setting up a database, design and initiation of funder mapping. So really trying to figure out like what aligns with what we want to do. I think there's a lot of growing momentum of different foundations that want to support Native communities and the work that we do, but really having a map of that would be helpful for us to know where we should dedicate our resources. And lastly, establish a reoccurring meeting with the CU funding team, which I already mentioned. So excited about this. Maybe it's not as fun as the community engagement that Cindy talked about, but I'm excited about these goals and excited to answer questions at the end here. So I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Okay, so I'm Sarah Moby and I led the Media and Dissemination Strategic Planning Hub. We had amazing membership in this hub, so a special thank you to Monica, Rebecca, Claudia, and Nicole. Everybody kind of came with differing experience with kind of what media and dissemination is, and so it was amazing to have kind of so many different perspectives on work that I do kind of on a daily basis, but that others aren't as familiar with. So maybe just briefly for us, we kind of envisioned media and dissemination as media being the sort of products and tools that we might use, like multimedia things, to facilitate dissemination. So sharing our projects with our many communities, as Cindy kind of pointed out, academic communities and our Native community partnerships, but also disseminating like who CAIANH is and how we spread word about the work that we do. So as a group, we identified 3 priority areas. The first was to create a CAIANH brand identity. One of the first activities we did was actually do kind of a survey of similar Native serving research institutions to see how they're kind of approaching their work and how they represent it on their websites and on their social media. And we really kind of came away with this feeling that CAIANH needs to have a greater sort of brand identity. So finding a way to make it clear that our projects are kind of under CAIANH, and so that as people start recognizing the work that we do with our center. So there's a couple of different sort of goals that we have, and then in the strategic plan, there's more steps to kind of clarify how we envisioned accomplishing these goals. But as Cindy also mentioned, there's a lot of flexibility in how we end up actually doing these things. So first is to finalize the mission and vision statement. We've already started that work, so the hub kind of just wanted to make sure we include it in our priority area to ensure that that's done. And then to kind of create the new logo and a brand style guide for people like us to use to know how to incorporate that kind of branding into their work. To evaluate the CAIANH website and make sure that it's working the way that we want it to and serving who we want it to. So doing kind of a survey or audit of our own website and kind of reformatting that to serve our needs, and then creating a suite of CAIANH branded products so that it's, so it's easy for everybody who works at the center to just go to some kind of hub and say, okay, I need a PowerPoint template or a Zoom background or something like that, so that we're making it easier to use these kinds of tools. The second is to establish CAIANH social media accounts. You might hear about this from multiple hubs, but we included it in our priorities, but there is some overlap. One of the things that we talked about is just being kind of thoughtful and strategic in how we do this. So doing kind of an evaluation of what social media platforms are going to work best for CAIANH, creating a toolkit for best practices, and then kind of instituting some processes so that individual projects know how to get their work published on the social media accounts for CAIANH, and kind of what sort of tools and things people would need to do that. And then, obviously launch the social media accounts, and then, do some evaluations to know that we're using those platforms effectively in the best way we can. And then to really use this to collaborate with other partners. Social media is a great way to share others' work as well as our own, and kind of create a relationship of reciprocity with our many community members, academics, as well as data. Okay. And finally, the third priority is to standardize dissemination practices at CAIANH.
Right now, many projects kind of just do their own dissemination work for the most part, and so there's things that are kind of siloed. And so our approach was, how can we sort of streamline those efforts and create processes that make it easier for individual projects to share their work, but then also CAIANH to share that work as well. So that could be, like one pagers for every project that's kind of community facing that then lives in a hub that people who are going to say table at the Denver March powwow have access to all of those one pagers and can share them easily. So kind of just to create better processes for us to share our work on a CAIANH basis and as well as on an individual basis. So like I said, talking about building kind of a central hub for those products and developing a lot more community-facing dissemination products, and then supporting multiple channels for dissemination so that we can make it easy for everybody to do this work and supporting them to do so. Okay, I went over a little bit, but that's it.
Great. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Nancy Rachel. I'm a professor here and the lead of the Research and Scientific Collaborations Hub. This is our team that did the work on this. We also had Carly Shango, who was with us for a while, left her off this list, but participated at the beginning. So again, as everyone else has said, really grateful to the way everyone participated and the sort of collaborative planning that we've done through this process. And research and scientific collaborations, and Jared kind of alluded to this, that is the bread and butter of what we do here. So we spend a lot of time thinking about and talking about what do we need in order to really support doing that very well. And one of the biggest things, we came up with 3 priorities through our process, but one of the biggest things was really to engage with emerging methodological approaches. So really help one another to stay abreast of what's changing, what's new, what do we need to be acting on and doing. And these are 4 that sort of bubbled to the top in our discussions. I will also say that this work was done before the regime change. So we, some of these things may look a little bit different. And I think in our plan that we'll talk about, I think there's room. I mean, the point is about emerging methodological approaches. So I think as we move forward in this work, we're going to need to be thinking at each point when we're ready to do something, what is it we need to be focusing on right now? But Indigenous research methodologies and thinking about how to really integrate those more deeply into the work that we all do was something that is really important. Also data sovereignty and data sharing and how do we do that in a way that's respectful of the communities we work with. We've all dealt with, small sample design and analysis and continuing innovations in that and how do we apply those to leverage the data that we do have from our partners. And then as Nicole is leading the space on really being more mindful about youth engaged approaches, a lot of the work, and maybe this is reflected in the hub membership, but a lot of us work with children and youth and recognizing the importance of youth being an important one of the communities that we engage with. So those are some of the priorities that we identified within that one priority. The second one, this kind of relates to data sovereignty and data sharing, but really kind of revisiting and going back to CAIANH protocols for data sharing. And there's a lot of work being done at the NIH around this right now. There's a lot of work being done in different spaces about how do we think about this and honor tribal sovereignty, but also share data so that it has bigger use. We all have that situation where we collect data. We don't have to do everything with it we want to, and there are other people who can leverage those data. So trying to think about how do we revisit what protocols we have in place for that as a center, and how do we support opportunities for data sharing. And also some standard language that we can use in grant applications around data sharing, because NIH has some policies. There are exceptions for work with American Indian, Alaska Native communities. We should develop some language together that we can have a standard protocol. So that was another piece of that. And then the third priority, there's a lot on this one. This goes back to supporting a lot of what the funding hub was talking about in terms of getting those grant applications out. We were thinking about what are ways that we can make it easier for those PIs writing our series grants for the folks who are working on center grants. And this is just part of the list, but the idea is that we create a repository that has those tools at your fingertips. And I know there's a lot of this that teams said the fiscal team has done a lot around some of the fiscal pieces of that. But if we have one central place that you can go to and say, you know what? I need a facilities and resources document. If you've written a grant, you know what that is. If you don't, you're like, whatever. But that's something we all have to include. And if we can have some standard language that then you can maybe tweak for a particular application, but we're not running around going, hey, Nicole, do you have a resources thing I can use? You know, so a lot of this is just making it as simple as possible and supporting investigators as much as possible. Another thing that's in here, NIH simplified review criteria, NIH overhauled its review criteria this year, and then overhauled NIH. But I think there's, you know, getting us some opportunities to cross-pollinate and educate one another and share is what we're really looking at for that. And in terms of what we need to do this, emerging methodological, I realize I left out a slide. Emerging methodological approaches, one of the things that we're thinking is let's use those annual CAIANH retreats. Use part of that time as an educational opportunity. So we have one this fall. We'd love to propose that we spend a lot of time really trying to understand together, what do we mean by Indigenous research methodologies? How do we use them in our work? How can we use them more in our work? How do we integrate them with the other methods that we use? So that's kind of rethinking, and then each year address an emerging methodological approach. So for that, we'll need a planning committee. We'll need some staff volunteer time to do that. We'll have the cost of the annual retreat would be a cost. For the data sharing protocols, we're thinking we need a committee to sit down and think, what should these be? And let's create that process. And then we used to have something called a data access committee. So if someone came to us and said, can we share, we know you have this data set, can we use it? That's kind of fallen off. We need to sort of reconstitute that or constitute somebody that's in that form. So we would need people to serve in that capacity. I'm gonna make my time, yes. Well, the last one is a big lift, that grant writing repository. We need a committee to come together and say, this is what should be in here. Let's get all those documents together. But that's also something that can't be static. It's gonna need to be kept up and updated because you guys know there's always like, ooh, new biosketch form or new this or new that. So there would need to be some staff time dedicated to maintaining that and making sure that, you know, if I go to that and pull something, I know it's current and accurate and appropriate. So that has a little bit more, that's going to be a lot of staff time probably in the long run, more in the beginning. And I think that's all I had. So yeah, somebody else can have my other 30 seconds. Thank you.
Good, I'll probably need it, so, I talk fast, but I talk long, so. Okay, Operations Hub, thank you to Carol, Rhonda, and Amanda for participating. We were small but mighty, and we figured out at one point that we had over 65 years of collective experience at the university and at CAIANH. So I was really lucky to get the historical perspective, but also Amanda's not new, but relatively newer perspective of being at CAIANH. I think one of the important things for us, given the historical engagement that we had, was to say everything that we want to do is built on a foundation of all of the people who came before us. But we really want to honor that this center has been here a long time, and there were many, many great people who contributed to the processes that we'll talk about today. Our goal now is just to align them with our current reality and to try to tweak them and to bring them into the contemporary time and needs. One cool thing we did as we started out, we wanted to spend some time getting to know each other in alignment with that connection piece of the strategic plan. We made a coat of arms for our operations hub. The mountain represents stability, the book represents knowledge, the hummingbird is creativity, and the dog is loyalty. That claddagh in the middle, that Irish symbol is loyalty. Just several of us in the group had been at CAIANH for a long time, and we are really proud to connect in that way and identify our strengths through this process. So we have a lot, so it won't be any surprise to know that from an operations-minded group, our goals tend to be applied and pretty practical and actionable. We only have a few that are more conceptual. It's too much to go over today, but I wanted to highlight the priority areas. We had 4 priority areas, and I think we have 4 or 5 goals under each one. So employee pathways. Our group started out brainstorming over several meetings and kind of identified that employee pathways was one thing that we really hit on immediately to highlight and focus on. So we asked, what are the things that employees need to be successful and feel fulfilled and stay at CAIANH beyond onboarding or the hiring process? And this priority area has obvious overlap with the work of the Recruitment and Retention Hub and the Community Connections Hub. All of these goals are listed in the strategic plan, so I'm not going to repeat them here, but I have them up in case you want to look at them. Priority area 2 is our organizational framework. We pretty early on identified the need to have an organizational framework. We're a large organization. We have a lot of people. We need to make sure that we're working in collaboration with each other, that there's clear organization, clear communication, and that we have the ability to plan far in advance to be able to capitalize on all the opportunities we all have in our heads that we sometimes think of maybe too late, but we want to put some structure in place so that we can do that. We recognize the need of additional opportunities to cultivate the leaders within our department. There are many leaders and people who have emerging leadership skills, and we want to see those and cultivate them in different ways. Again, alignment here with Recruitment and Retention Hub and the Community Connections Hub. Priority area 3 for us was building sustainable spaces. We have an amazing building that we're in. We are extremely lucky to be in this space, and we want to take care of it. We want to show it off, and we want to ensure that we're utilizing it in the way that it was intended when it was built. So again, honoring that tradition of CAIANH, that's a physical kind of manifestation. This building is of the history of CAIANH, and it's still developing. You know, we're still kind of cultivating donors and people to bring beautiful art to our space. Priority area 4 is outward-looking engagement. So this is built on an acknowledgement that part of our identified community is right here on campus. It's other schools, it's other people within the School of Public Health, it's people we share space with in this building. How can we look across those folks and make those collaborations? We've seen a surge of students, in no small part to the certificate program, wanting to be involved in supporting CAIANH's mission. How can we do that? That's something you've heard a couple other hubs talk about already. And again, here, alignment with the Community Connections Hub. Quick summary, this is what we're going to focus on in year 1 of the Operations Hub goals. We have some pretty specific action items and milestones for those goals written out in the strategic plan, so hopefully you all can take a look at those. A lot, as other people have said, a lot of our Operations Hub goals really rely on staff time. We can do a lot without spending very much money at all or nothing. Some of them take a little bit of an investment that we will look at over time in light of our current situation. But it doesn't mean we can't, just because things have changed since January, doesn't mean we can't work on things. We're going to keep moving forward with our goals. Okay. So that was the end of the hub reviews. A couple things thinking about next steps. So this is the obvious next question. Our next step is to share our strategic plan with a broader audience within the School of Public Health. Of course, that includes Dean Bradley, but it also includes partners on the administrative team who support research, human resources, and the administration of the school. We also want to share with our community partners in Denver and the Rocky Mountain region, Colorado Trust. There may be others. If you can think of others, you can use that survey that we sent out, and we'll send it out again as a feedback. We'd love to know who else you want to share this with to be able to share the plans that we have for the future. I also wanted to take a moment to introduce our Legacy Keepers team. You see their names listed here. This is a newer group within CAIANH that's comprised of people who have responsibilities for running the department in various areas. It started because I already talked to all of them one-on-one, and we just thought this is crazy. We should just meet together so that we have an idea instead of it's me talking to Sarah and then Hip, we should just meet together. So it's been really good. We focused a lot recently on trying to put together a calendar of things that we have going on. We also just float ideas, try to identify staff who might be helpful or interested in leading certain efforts. And we chose the name Legacy Keepers. There were a lot of good contenders, but we chose that name because we really wanted to, again, honor the 30+ year history of CAIANH and build on this amazing foundation that's already been laid, and just use that going forward to keep bringing in more people, widening our circle, and expanding kind of our sphere of influence and who is influencing us. We're a pretty informal group. We meet monthly. You can always share by email with me or any of us on this committee, ideas that you might have. But we're also going to be tasked with shepherding the strategic plan going forward. So it's not that the hubs disappear, but they become less prominent because we're now really focused on goal completion. We've broken down our goals by quarter. There is a humongous spreadsheet that's on the intranet site that all of you can take a look at. It's got all the goals by hub and by quarter. And the Legacy Keepers group is going to start going quarter by quarter and identifying how we can accomplish those goals. Now, please don't hear me say that the Legacy Keepers group is now responsible for all goals of the strategic plan, because that is not what's happening. But we will help shepherd that. We will ask for your participation and try to plug people in where we think that they may do really well or have an interest or a skill that could benefit that. Starting with early next week, we will send all of you an interest survey to let us know in the next 2 quarters, which goal do you think that you can support and participate in. And it'll be a process like that. Every few quarters, we'll ask people to re-engage with new goals. Some of these goals are just one and done. They're a Saturday or a Friday afternoon, and some of them are going to take all 3 years to accomplish. So that will come to the Legacy Keepers group to try to formulate that and move that forward in a way that is trying to keep in time with our milestones and our quarterly milestones, I should say, but also being flexible enough to adjust as needed when things come up or feedback from groups come up. So the Legacy Keepers group is going to follow up. We'll also do periodic presentations. This is outlined in the strategic plan as well, to let us know how we're doing. So the retreat is an obvious place where we will do that, and we'll try at the quarterly meetings to give kind of a report out of where things stand with our goal completion. So one thing that's come up is questions about how to get engaged after you have that. Do you need your supervisor's approval? Is this going to be written into your performance evaluation or job description? The answer is yes, you should do this in collaboration with your supervisor. As everybody essentially has said, we'll need everybody to engage at some point in this process to keep our goals moving forward and to make sure that we achieve them in a way that's meaningful to all of us. We don't want it to get shrunken down to a small group. We want as many people engaged as possible. And we will, the Legacy Keepers group, as I said, will help shepherd that. But you'll want to work with your supervisor to make sure that it aligns. Your work is still your priority. And we're going to try to make it as easy as possible to participate. It will not be written into anybody's performance evaluation, but if you participate and you want to write it into your performance evaluation and say that you participated, I think that's a great thing to list as a professional development tool or possibly goal for yourself for the next year. Okay. Gratitudes. This is kind of wrapping up before we get to questions. We really couldn't have done this without all of you. As we said, the strategic plan was grassroots intentionally, and pretty much everybody got involved, and it's just been a tremendous amount of time. And so we want to share our gratitude with everybody for participating. I really want to thank Spiro and the executive committee for supporting us in doing this and giving us license to do it in a way that felt really good to all of us and very organic and CAIANH led, employee led. So I want to thank everybody for that. And also really want to thank the hub leads who put in tons and tons of time and effort often at the end of the day, 4 or 5 o'clock meetings before holidays, they just showed up and it was amazing. So couldn't have done it without you all. And these little succulent plants are for each of you, Jared, Jen, Sarah, Cindy, Nancy, to take home as a small token of my gratitude to you all for the amount of time. I mean, there's no way I could ever compensate you for the time and support and just like encouragement, because this is a long process that we went through together. So thank you all. And with that, we will move into questions. Reminder to everybody, you can ask live questions. I'll check the poll right now, but you can also use this email, caianh.outreach@cuanches.edu for follow-up, and you can scan that to access that Qualtrics survey to give more feedback. So let me open it up to the group. Anything else? Any questions, anything, feedback anybody wants to share?
I just want to reciprocate the appreciation and gratitude before we get into the questions. Aaron thanked all the pub leads and everybody else for doing this, but really Aaron's been at the helm, at the point of really bringing this into existence and organizing us and having a vision and, you know, rallying everybody around this central cause. So I just want to say thank you so much to Aaron.
My pleasure.
Did you get yourself a second?
Because if you buy yourself a gift, it's like less of a gratitude. I actually said that as I was buying. It's so cute. No. My partner was like, "You don't need another plant." Okay, go
I
ahead,
have
Sarah.
a specific question
Yes.
for your team. When you did the research about other centers, what did you find out about social media specifically?
A lot of them are doing it, and like, and doing it to varying degrees. And some of them are doing it really well, and others are, like, academic institutions tend to do it a lot less. But we were looking at, like, We Are Native, and that's kind of one of their main mandates, is to have that presence. So there's a lot to be learned from what others are doing, so I think there's a huge space for us in there.
I'm gonna get to a couple of questions on the live poll. There was a question about, can we be part of multiple hubs? Since we're kind of transitioning away from the hub model, it's really about, can I work on several goals? Yes, of course, you can get involved with as many goals as you would like, as long as you have your supervisor's support. So that's the answer there. Is there a particular hub or two who are anticipating will need more human power going forward? Which has the most need? I have to look at the goal sheet to see. So again, it's more like time. I would say operations, we have 4 priority areas, and I think we have 5 goals under each one. So we're gonna need a lot of hands to help with that. And it seems like it's not that fun, but it's actually very fun to think about operations stuff, and especially around the building. And I think we can certainly put that in the interest survey, aligning those to the goals to see who needs the most help right away. Other questions, feedback, anybody?
I was just gonna add to that, Erin. I think when you guys look at the list, there are things that are gonna take a day and there are things that are gonna take 3 years. I mean, it's gonna be a lot different depending on what the specific activity is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And there probably are opportunities then to do some short-term things and some long-term things, or do several short-term, I think the calendar is a great idea. And finding when people might have space in August, but not until when it's gonna be happening.
Yeah. That's a great point. I think we have an acknowledgement. It will take everybody, but everybody's gonna have limited time at some times, and you're not gonna be able to plug in maybe in the way that you want. We all totally understand that. It's gonna ebb and flow. So we just ask that you plug in where you can, where you have an interest, where you think you have a skill to share. And if you're still curious about how to get involved, you can always reach out to any of the leads by email. You can reach out to that CAIANH outreach email. You can respond to the survey. We'll make sure to plug you in to getting those goals completed.
And I think, I don't know if we said this, but the interest survey, I think, will only be the first 2 quarters. So it'll be something that we end up sending out, as we complete things and as we move forward through the timeline. So it's not like you're signing up for 100 things for the next 3 years. Kind of quarter by quarter.
And I also just want to call out, like, that there was a lot of thought and intentionality behind kind of going away a little bit more from the hub model. So that way folks can really feel like they can take ownership and engagement into each of those goals when it fits into your schedule, when it fits into your skill set. We didn't want anybody to feel like, oh, I'm forced to be on this hub, and so I'll just show up for the meetings, but then I can kind of check out. We really hope that this other approach allows you to feel some ownership, some engagement that's more meaningful and on your terms. But as Aaron and everybody has already mentioned, it is going to be somewhat of an all hands on deck situation. So we would love it for you to just really reflect on those goals for the next 2 quarters, and where do you feel like you can contribute and really put yourself out there. We'd love that.
Anybody on Zoom? I know we have quite a few. We can't see you, but I'm sure we can hear you.
Hi, this is Doug. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is more, well, first of all, this is amazing. My thanks to everyone for all the incredible work. This is more an observation than a question. I think it's really interesting that we're coming out with a strategic plan at this time in our nation's history, especially around what's happening in the federal government. And I think that we need to be prepared with the dissemination work that a lot of people are in survival mode right now, including people at high administrative levels. So it could be a little hard to talk about strategy with them, but then also I expect that we may be somewhat unique in really thinking so thoughtfully and strategically during a time of crisis, and that could be an advantage. But I do think we need to be aware of kind of where all folks on campus and around the country are in terms of all the challenges we're facing.
Thank you. It's a great point. Okay, we are right at the top of the hour, so I want to remind you again, this will be your place to ask questions going forward or reach out by email. We are in the implementation phase officially, but we're still going to be working behind the scenes and adjusting as needed. So thank you all for your time today, and go forth and prosper.